Is live now.
Thank you, Asif. Namaste. Thank you for joining day 2 of the workshop on 5G networks, strategies for enabling standards-driven technologies and innovation, which is being organized by Telecommunications Standards Development Society India and Telecommunications Industry Association, TIA. I am Bindu Srivastav and I am responsible for Marcom and partner relations at TSDSI. Digital communication technologies play an indispensable role in our lives, which is expected to be further enhanced by 5G. TSDSI's 5Gi standard has recently been approved by ITU as one of the 3 radio interface technologies of IMT 2020, which is popularly known as 5G. TIA has a rich history of developing and establishing global standards which are critical to the deployment of various communications networks. TSDSI and TIA are organizing this workshop to focus on supporting but critical aspects for deployment of technologies in the prevailing environment. The day 1 of this workshop, which was held on 7th April, deliberated on data center infrastructure and supply chain security. Today, we will be talking about service performance reliability in the context of connected vehicles and interoperability for public safety networks in a mobile domain. So before we start the day's proceedings, I would just like to make a few hygiene announcements. This workshop is being recorded and presentations from the workshop will be uploaded on the event website, both on TSDSI and TIA websites. If you want to see the recordings, you can download them from our websites later. All attendees would be kept in mute mode throughout the workshop. You can chat, you can communicate with each other using chat, and you can post your questions in the questions tab. My colleague Rebecca from TIA would be taking the questions for the speakers from the question tab. If any questions remain unanswered due to paucity of time, they will be responded to post the workshop on our website. So we begin this first session for the day, which is on service performance reliability, requirements from next-gen networks for connected vehicles. This session is being chaired by Mr. Jacques Flouet and Mr. Sharad Arora, and it is my privilege to introduce them. Welcome, Jacques, to the session. Mr. Jacques Flouet is a Director, Network Assurance and Data Center Programs at TIA. He has over 30 years of industry experience in wireless, optical, and access networks. Since joining TIA, he has been involved in next-generation networks, 5G, IoT, smart buildings, edge data centers, and key applications from the various vertical domains. Thank you, Jacques, for being here, for helping design this session, and looking forward to your chairing the session. We also have Mr. Sharad Arora, who is a co-chair of this session. Sharad is the co-chair of Outreach Committee and the vice chair of the study group Services and Solutions at TSDSI. He's also a key member of the Roadmap Committee of TSDSI. He is the founder of Sensorized Digital Services and a technology evangelist. He has vast experience spanning telecom technologies, operator IT and BSS, certification authority technologies and deployment, M2M IoT, SIM cards, related infrastructure, and security. So we will start the session with a context setting and keynote by Mr. Jacques Flouet, followed by a panel discussion. So I now hand over to Mr. Jacques Flouet for his presentation.
Thank you, Bindu. Welcome, everyone. I want to talk today, give a small introduction. It's going to be short, but put it in context for what is service performance reliability in next generation of networks. Next chart, please. So we'll talk about the 5G vision and requirements, the service performance, the minimum guaranteed performance, which is kind of a new concept, 5G performance enhancing features, network slicing, service performance reliability, and then to introduce the panels, the vehicle connectivity. Next chart, please. So 5G vision and requirements, the vision of 5G is that the network is no longer a limitation to the creativity of the application developers. It's a services-defined network. No longer do we develop applications by saying, here's what the network can do, but it's more like the imagination is the limit, and then the network will adapt to it. That's really the vision around 5G. And all the requirements that we have into 5G today have been provided by all the domains that you see in there, from automotive to factories to education, retail. Everybody has provided what they would need as far as flexibility and performance to deliver the vision they have for their various domains. Next chart, please. Here's a few examples of those requirements that were provided to the 3GPP organization that is providing the specifications for 5G. Okay, it's only a very small sample of them, but as you can see in there, it starts with the dense urban mobile broadband, what we do on our smartphone every day. We're talking about having a user download data rate of 300 megabit per second. Okay, that's a lot better than what we have today, with all kinds of additional extra density that are required there. We're talking about robotic motion control. This is one of the most demanding one. We're looking at an end-to-end latency of 1 millisecond, very low jitter, a high availability rate of over the 6 nines. This is really, really high, and a very high connection density as well. You look at intelligent transport systems, also looking at very low latency, very, very high availability. Smart grid, electricity distribution, extremely low latency and extremely high availability there too. Okay, and you go into and then on the other side of things, you get some things like the massive meshing type communication, which is more like all the IoT device that you have monitoring, the performance of the various equipment, the weather, the temperature. A lot more, not much restriction on latency. Those things don't have to provide you data all the time, but a very, very high user density of IoT devices, and be able to support mobility up to 500 kilometers per hour. So those are additional new demands for it. And then things that we're going to see coming more and more into our day-to-day life is augmented and virtual reality. This is also it's also very, very demanding on the network as well, with very high download data rate and very low latency as well. Those are some examples of what we're seeing today as part of the new types of services and what the network has to be able to adapt to. Next chart, please. This brings the concept of minimum guaranteed performance. I had multiple talks with various people from the industry domains, from the manufacturing industry, from healthcare, from education, from everywhere. And they were always coming back to me with saying, the networks are good today. And especially when you talk about the wireless network, if they want mobility, it's very good today on average, but it's no longer good enough. I want to be able to get a very reliable performance at the moment and at the place where I am at this point in time. So it's really like a reliability for the service performance, a guaranteed minimum performance from the network. And that's something fairly new concept, because right now what we have is more in the SLAs, it becomes more like an average performance over time. We're going to be better at certain time and worse at others, but on average, we're pretty good. And that's what we have, today in all our houses during this pandemic time. So it's concept of going from minimizing and eliminating network outages to minimizing and eliminating the service degradation on each individual service. And that's really what the vision of the service performance reliability is all about. Next chart, please. 5G has been designed with a series of, I would say, performance enhancing features. 5G is designed from the very beginning as a software-defined network. Pretty much everything that is part of the core of the network has been defined as a virtual cloud native network functions. And then on the RAN side, the radio access networks, it's being worked right now with various groups that are looking at an open virtualized version of the RAN. And that's being deployed it's starting to be deployed in networks around the world. There's the concept of distributed computing, everything being cloud native, container based, and you can, break the various parts of the functions and deploy it where they're most efficient for the users and for the network efficiency as well. New spectrums have been defined for 5G. We're talking about millimeter wave that provides extremely high capacity and a lot of the very, very low latency as well. Improved radio protocol for faster communication, going into subframes and being able to really have a very, very low latency at the radio link level. Local breakout, the separation of the user and the control planes, being able to get the data straight out of the end device and reroute them right there at the edge. Don't need to go back to the core before you connect it somewhere. You can just extract it at the edge and be able to route it where it needs to be, adding more possibilities for lower latency and higher reliability as well. Enhanced coverage. This is something that's always been I would say, a very weak point of the wireless networks. You cannot guarantee coverage everywhere. In 5G, there's the concepts that is being introduced in the next releases of non-terrestrial networks. Okay, having flying base stations either in low orbiting satellite or in high altitude platform stations. You will have those types of base stations would be able to enhance the coverage in all kinds of parts of the world where there's very low coverage or there's extremely low population right now. Reliable performance, a key functionality of 5G is the network slicing. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of charts, but this is a key contributor to this reliable performance. And then also an adaptable high performance network. All of this doesn't give you all the benefits if you cannot really optimize the network, optimize the connection, reassign the resources in a dynamic fashion based on the demand from the users. Next chart, please. Network slicing. A network slice is really like a logical network that is designed to serve a defined business purpose and comprises all the required network resources configured and connected end-to-end. It's really a group of dedicated network resources for your particular service or a group of services. This is being defined by 3GPP, MEF, TM Forum, GSMA, etc. Everybody has a part of it that is being defined, so we can do a slice from the end, from the user to the servers and back. So it's an end-to-end slice inside the network. It could be multi-operators. So all of this is being defined as we speak. Okay, there's the concept of network slice type that GSMA has been working on, that defines all the attributes that characterize the network slice for a given customer use cases. So every attribute on performance, but also security, capacity, speed, everything that needs to be defined when you define a slice. I've put here a small example of what it could mean. We're looking at here at a connected ambulance, okay, which is part of our connected vehicles. You would have various types of services in there. You could have a video connection with somebody in the hospitals that can provide supervision during the travel, and if something needs to be done urgently while the ambulance is bringing the injured person to the hospitals, you would have a video connection. You could have a voice connection on top of that. All the sensors that are connected to that person can be reflected on a doctor's screen at the hospital. On top of that, the vehicle would send some vehicle system performance information to the people doing the maintenance of the vehicles. And then you would have also an emergency traffic control, so the vehicle could, be in contact with the traffic systems of the city and be able to reprogram the routes to have green lights as they're going to the hospital. All of those services that you see here, they don't all need the same performance. They don't all need the same capacity. They don't all need the same reliability. And that's what we would call a slice. Okay, every one of them would have its own requirements and performance. And they could be, like, for example, on this one, there could be 5 ongoing slices at the same time going on in the network. Some being very high reliability, some like vehicle certain performance info. Well, if you don't send it now, send it a little bit later. It's not a big deal, So you would have various classes of service in there in the various slices. That's really the idea behind it. Next slide, please. So we've had a working group working on the concept of service performance reliability. Today we have a measure that we're using pretty much everywhere in the world that's called the availability of the networks. And it's really the famous 5 nines, the fact that at the nodal level and at the connection levels, everything is up and running at least 99.999% of the time. It's very well defined in the TL 9000 standard. We're looking at if we were to really go into the service reliability and going at it from a service principle, looking at the service performance reliability measurement, which would be defined by the percentage of time when the service connection performance of an active network slice of a certain type is above the minimum acceptable performance level. It's something that would be very, very important to have people with defining how to measure it and how to work it is still something we're working on right now. But it's something that you could compare between the users, the service providers, across communication service providers as well, if they have to interconnect network to provide the end-to-end service. Be able to define what the service performance reliability is end-to-end, and then subdivide this performance reliability for each owner of the various parts of the end-to-end connection. So we've done a lot of good discussions around it. We're getting ready for a proof of concept as the network slices are going to be deployed in the 5G network. But one of the key components of network slicing is 5G standalone core, and this thing is just starting to be deployed. And the RAN slices specifications will be released next year by 3GPP. So it's still a work in progress, but we're getting prepared for it. So when this thing starts to be deployed, we have some concepts that we would like to be able to test for it. Next slide, please. And just an example of it, but one of the key things also of 5G is defining the cellular V2x. V2x means vehicle to everything. And it's all part of the vehicle connectivity. There's a wide variety of service performance requirements for just a vehicle, as you've seen in my previous example. But if we look at the way V2X is defined right now, it's like it starts with V2V, the vehicle to vehicle, V2I, vehicle to infrastructure, which is really the traffic management infrastructure, V2P, vehicle to pedestrian or any other vulnerable road users, the V2D, vehicle to device, V2G, vehicle to grid, and V2N, which is the very important one for all the operators. It's the vehicle to network. And in the vehicle to network, it goes from, emergency support, like you get in an accident and the car dialed automatically for the first responders, to getting traffic updates, to software updates of the various systems in your car, media streaming and entertainment for keeping the passenger occupied, asset tracking, and every other options all other communications that you could have in your car. So there's a lot of different types of services in there, and they don't all have the same need for reliability, but they all have a need for reliability. Some are very highly reliable, some can live with a lower reliability, but they all have very important needs for that. So that's really what all the vehicle connectivity is about, but we'll hear a lot more about it in the panel that is coming. Next chart, please. Thank you very much for this quick introduction. If you want to communicate with me, my name is Jacques Flouet, and here's my email address. Don't hesitate. I always like to have questions and talk with people about those subjects that are a little bit of passion to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flouet, for the very interesting context setting and keynote. The concept of service performance reliability at the network slice level is especially very important and useful for me, even as a user. So now I'll request Rebecca to take any questions that may have been posted for Mr. Flouet.
Yes, thank you, Bindu. I do have a couple of questions here. So, Jacques, how do you see service performance reliability being implemented in the networks over time?
Yeah, the service performance reliability is extremely important. We won't necessarily have all the features in the network, like network slicing and everything from day one, or a dynamic network even from day one. So 5G is going to be deployed in steps. What we're seeing right now in most of the countries is more like a very, I would say, a highly enhanced 4G. Providing more capacity, providing lower latency, and there's a big push also through the virtualization of most of the nodes. I think that's where the effort is, and it's going to be for the next couple of years. Once we have that, then we're going to start seeing a lot more of the implementation of network slices, and I think at the same time, more intelligence in the network, more autonomy in the network, and all this dynamic orchestration is going to start. And once you have that, that's when you can get into with the minimum guaranteed performance. Before that, you would have to do a little bit like we do today in 5G. If you want to guarantee performance, you really have to over provision the network to make sure that it's going to have enough capacity to absorb the peaks and valleys, and then hope for the best once this is done.
Thank you. And one more question here. Is 5G critical to the implementation of these new services?
5G is not necessarily critical to the implementation of the services themselves. Okay, many of those services can exist today on 4G. You just need to engineer the 4G properly for it. And as I say, it might require some over provisioning as well. The concept of the minimum guaranteed performance is really what 5G, where 5G comes in. It's really needed to be able to guarantee the performance. For the others, it's more like a priority-based services, and depending then on how much traffic and how much congestions you may have in the network, you cannot guarantee the performance. But 5G is going to be what really brings it to the new level.
And we do have one more, I believe we have time for. Is 6 nines a reliability feature in all 5G networks, or is it for specialized networks?
It's for specialized applications and services in the network. Okay, that's the idea behind 5G. You could have multiple slices living in the same network. Some are going to be highly reliable. Some won't need to be as highly reliable. If you monitor the temperature in a building, well, if you lose a few packets, you can just retransmit. It's not very important that you get the temperature 1 second late. If you're in the middle of a assisted surgery where you have a surgeon that's monitoring the activity of a surgeon in a remote hospital, you cannot have the video freezing. So there's various levels of reliability that is required, and they all going to be able to coexist in the same network instead of having one big pipe with one level of reliability that everybody has to rely on. That's really the concept around the slices.
Okay, we do have one more question. Bindu, do we have time for one more?
Yes, I think a last question can be taken.
Okay, thank you. How do you see the theoretical specs in reality considering regular power outages, yearly field fires in India for agriculture use case? How do you see the theoretical specs in reality considering regular power outages, field fires, etc.?
The reliability is going to have to be maintained anyway, so that the principle is you have to be able, if you want, you either going to have to locate your service where it's more reliable, or you have to build backup systems so that you can work anyway. If you're looking at a virtual networks are based on really virtual functions that are run on data centers. If you've listened to my presentation 2 days ago, we're talking about one of the key items in most of the data centers is the resiliency of the data centers, being able to keep the power on and being reliant, not only being resilient by themselves, which is very important, but also being resilient as a network. So you may have various ways to get, if you really want to build a highly reliable 6-9 type of systems, you're going to have to build redundancy in your connections and even multiple possible connections working in parallel. If you're looking at some of the specs of 5G for those highly reliable networks, those highly reliable connections, they're looking at having multiple towers being able to provide you signals in parallel. So if a tower if a tower goes down, then the next one can take up the load. So it's all going to be, it has to be built in the resiliency of your communications.
Thank you, Jacques. And we do have another, but maybe we can cover that after the panel discussion.
Very good.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. So now we get into the panel discussion. I'll quickly introduce the very esteemed panel that we have for this session. We first have Mr. Asit Kadian. Mr. Asit Kadian is the advisor at Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, TRAI, and he's responsible for the quality of service issues in mobile and fixed line networks. He's also dealing with net neutrality, cloud computing, and OTT related issues. Welcome, Mr. Kadian, to the panel. Next, we have Mr. Satish Jamadagni. Mr. Satish Jamadagni is a vice chair of TSTSI and also chair of the network study group at TSTSI. He's currently vice president and head of standards at Reliance Jio. He has over 23 years of industry experience in the telecom domain. Unfortunately, Satish's camera, the machine camera is not working, so he'll be available with us on audio. This video will not be visible. Welcome, Satish, to the panel. Next, we have Mr. Ajay Mittal. Mr. Mittal is the head of digital and analytics at Volvo Eicher. He's been leading this digital solution technical delivery roadmap for connected services, leveraging vehicle digitalization at an automotive OEM. Welcome, Mr. Mittal, to the panel. Next, we have Mr. Alok Sethi. Mr. Alok Sethi is a general manager of for transportation technology solutions at the Delhi Integrated Multimodal Transit Systems, DIMTS. He has more than 23 years experience in intelligent transportation systems, mainly on deployment of GPS, GIS, PIS, fare collection systems, paratransit ITS, etc. Welcome, Mr. Sethi. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Bhushan Sethi. Mr. Sethi is the head of IoT product and solutions for Vodafone Idea Limited for the last 3 years, and he's taking care of product development, operations, and advanced solutions. He's also responsible for formulating the long-term strategy for IoT product, platforms, and people for the next phase of growth and driving revenues. Welcome, Mr. Sethi. And now I hand over back to Sharad Arora, who will be leading this panel, moderating the panel. Over to you, Sharad.
Thank you, Bindu, and a warm welcome to all the panelists. I would also like if Jacques can please join the panel after that incredibly exciting presentation. So today's panel, as Bindu says, is a really powerful panel, and it has people from the industry, from networks, from policy, and our purpose today is going to be to try to uncover just exactly what is likely to be the response of this ecosystem to the network enabled connected vehicle platforms of tomorrow, which are already more or less now across the board. There isn't a company I know of in India that doesn't have a connected vehicle, and this change has happened in the last maybe 3 years. So how this ecosystem is going to embrace the 5G technology, but also more importantly, the connected paradigm. And in that, how this entire ecosystem is likely to work together in order to deliver what can be called this concept which Jacques just put in front of us of a highly reliable, more or less dynamically orchestrable connected paradigm which aims at minimizing or eliminating network outages to deliver what can be called an almost always on network. And I think it's very interesting in this context also to clarify that there is a massive amount of brand image that rides on this. And surprisingly, we've had Elon Musk going to press saying that his cars actually don't need networks. So put the cat amongst the pigeon with what all else is happening with either his ambitions of the low Earth orbit networks or his ambitions of what is going to happen with the electronics that he's making with the edge computing, etc. So it's a lot of options out there, and I think it's good for network providers to have their piece of action under the sun, because as a telco, been there twice, I do get a feeling that at times the telcos lose out on certain aspects of monetization. You get too busy with the plumbing and you forget how the service actually touches the beneficiary. And here, what are the beneficiaries? We are talking about public security, for instance. Mr. Sethi here would have a very good view to give to you, I hope, at the time when he gets this chance, to say how incredibly important is this security, is this resilience to the implementation of public security. And then we have car brands that are internet inside as the brand. You know, you're talking to your consumers saying there's internet inside. So there is brand riding on it, there is public security riding on it, and of course more. So I'm going to just launch myself straight into it now with that little context to ask Ajay, as the man who's representing the industry, and maybe then Mr. Sethi as a man who's seen it all, exactly what, in your opinion, constitutes the connected vehicle platform. To my mind, there are 5 pillars that I've been looking at, which is compliance like BS6 AIS 140, like predictive maintenance with OBD, like driver passenger safety, there's in-car productivity and navigation, and then there is autonomous, that entire area of autonomous. What is your short list of the key requirements?
Right. Hi everybody. Thanks, Sharad, for this the introduction. I'll say this is a very good introduction that you put it up, and I think you put a couple of people on the spot. Let me put that way.
They're going to come back to us. They are the service providers.
Right. So again, I didn't want to name them, but still. So again, the top 5 or top 6 priorities that you have set up, yes, they are there. Definitely they are there, and that is why we wanted to leverage the latest in the technology, the latest in the digitalization. Yes, it rides on it. The couple of areas which I want to add up among those 5 which you have said is, number one is definitely defining the standards of communication. When I mean by standards of communication, means standards to be put up into a standard form across the geography. That is one part. And second is, what are the data processing and data security guidelines that we want to put up in the geography? We have seen it has thrown a lot of challenges in terms of the change in technology. As an OEM, we have to embrace on. We have to bring in those capabilities in the market to the consumer. As end consumer, there are certain aspects which have to kept in mind. Number one is definitely data security being of a prominent nature by anybody who sees that, okay, where is my data going, who is using it now. It has taken a more prominent role nowadays. So that question keeps on coming. But who is using my data? And as an OEM, I don't know whether it is my responsibility to become a controller and processor. Who is liable in case somebody misuses it? Is it the network? Is it the SIM provider? Is it the device provider? Or is it an OEM? So I don't know. So those areas definitely needs to be brought into, I say, as part of the key priority for us. And we need help from the relevant bodies to bring a guidance and a standardization across it. That's one part. And second thing is, whenever any such thing comes in, please bring it in the form of a standardization of implementation.
Excellent.
So these aspects, I'll say, are the key ones that I'll add up. And number one, and the other aspect which I want to add up is, with new things coming in, we have to become more of a service provider and also look for new service and revenue models. So it's not that we can be just left behind as a one OEM, as a vehicle, or so as you mentioned, like internet inside and Mr. Elon Musk making some statement. So I think he's moving in that direction. He's saying, I want to be the service provider, right? So I think with that, I'll rest my case here. I have Alok add up. So what's his view?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ajay. Excellent comprehension there and articulation. It always gives me this great joy when I look at someone like you as an end beneficiary stating so clearly that there is a need for standardization and that we will pick up in the consolidation. Alok, please give us some user level, policymaker level insights about what's your perception of the key needs. Are we completely missing it by hacking away at autonomous or the more onboard diagnostics, etc.? What exactly is priority?
So thanks. First of all, thanks for a beautiful presentation by Zach and good context setting by Sharad. So what do you call, the priority areas are all listed. Usually in India, we start with compliance, or maybe you call regulation per se. Though the use cases existed for the industry, which is in-car entertainment or maybe vehicle diagnostics, they have been around for a long time. But finally, to give it a push, we decided to make it a start with a compliance product with a very different theme on mind, which was related to passenger safety. I mean, we have had our own challenges while implementing it. So obviously, it has if I in a hindsight, if I say, it's been a good decision to start that way, because it has rather than it has set the base for us to move into the other services. Like if you are looking at the plants per se, we will be moving into much more critical or user responsive requirements going forward. So be it GPS based tolling, or the road pricing mechanism based on these telematic devices. We would be moving into financial payments, which are linked to the vehicle directly, going through So from a telematics angle to a fintech plus telematic angle is, wherein the security, data privacy would, still become much more important. Regulation wise, there is not much, but from now on, what I feel is user needs would drive the market, and the basic thing which was lacking and which is, the base of 5G is, the reliability and the performance availability. That is where we have been lacking with the country of our size and network availability currently. What I would like to say is, primarily the networks are best effort basis in India, and the use cases which we, plan to implement or not are all enterprise case, and or maybe, very, very like passenger safety or an emergency response, you would require high reliability. So at that point, we would need to, migrate or upgrade our infrastructure both on, the devices side or the network side.
Okay, thanks, Alok. So basically, Ajay pointed us to the fact that data processing, data security, a common standard across all geographies. Basically, I think he's asking for some kind of a minimum guarantee that Jacques presented in his earlier slides. And then Alok's adding that aside from the 5 things that we brought up, compliance, passenger safety, critical public facilities, including now, for instance, tolling. And I think the Minister of Road Transport and Highways has alluded to removing all the tolls. So telematics becoming an important element, and together with that, connected telematics becoming more or less the enabler of 50-60,000 crores worth of revenue, etc. Now, with that said, may I turn to maybe in that order, Mr. Sethi, Mr. Satish, and then lastly, Mr. Kadian, to wrap up on the fact about where are we going with reliability from the network. There are these expectations of connected cars with the brand. There are expectations of passenger safety with AIS 140 type alerts and alarms. There are expectations of tolling, etc. Now, how does this sit vis-a-vis the actual deliverability or provisioning of such a network or such a service and its reliability? Mr. Sethi, would you like to start with your comments? Is 5G what it takes? Is 4G good enough?
Sorry, sometimes I get confused whether you're asking Alok Sethi or you're calling Bhushan Sethi.
Okay, I'm going to use the first name. Thank you, Bhushan, for reminding me that. Bhushan, we start with you first, and then we come to Satish, and then we go to Mr. Kadian.
My apologies and many thanks, to TSDSI to include me in this panel. It's a very elite panel. Yeah, I have my mentor, I have my guide, I have my good friend Alok in the call. I have my esteemed customer Ajay. So it's a very elite panel for me, and good evening to all of you. I think 5G is a very important piece to address the need for the CVP in the coming time. If you remember 2G times, when it was 2G, it started with tracking of the devices, vehicles, and all that thing. 3G came up, it further expanded. 4G actually led to, I would say, more larger commercial operations. I think people were doing more of testings in 2G and 3G, but when LTE arrived, people actually started deploying connected car commercially into the market. We have large OEMs, Hyundai, Nissan, Kia Motors. They have already, they have already gone with the connected car initiative, and they are currently doing navigation, telematics, and emergency services. They are already providing in their connected car. But I think with 5G, things are going to change. The sensors are going to increase in the vehicle. Currently, there are about 30 to 40 or 50 sensors being used. But now with the with more sensors being used, more lidars, radars, cameras coming into the picture, the amount of data which will get now created is huge. I was reading somewhere. The data is going to be 3 GB per hour to almost 40 GB per hour. Okay. Now, this amount of data could not be done by LTE. Okay, this definitely needs 5G to come, and similarly latency is a very, very important piece. I think while lidar, so there are two things, the lidar, radar, and camera can provide you line of sight safety as long as you are able to see the road across. These sensors are able to see, they do well. But when it comes to non-line of sight, that is where V2X comes into the picture, and V2X is going to create huge amount of data further. Okay, and it needs very, very low latency. One very interesting fact I was reading, that if a vehicle is traveling at 60 kilometers per hour and it is being asked to apply a brake, if it is 4G device, the vehicle will go up to 4 feet before it stops. Whereas if it is a 5G enabled device, the vehicle will only travel 2.8 centimeter. So that's the huge difference, in an accident, 4 feet versus 2.8 centimeter, when the devices are 5G. So I think 5G is the right choice, and I'm very sure that 5G is not only going to reshape the cars driving as well as manufacturing. And when I say reshaping, does not mean new shapes of the vehicle, but the business model, the business processes, the new offers which automotive could do to the customers are going to change. 5G is going to bring a mobile-like experience to the cars. As Ajay just said, it's an experience, correct? So that is what the cars will eventually become. They will give you a digital experience, a better experience every time you get into the car. Today the cars are painful.
Okay, it's very, very nice. I personally have read so much, but still I stand illuminated a bit about the things that you described: radars, lidars, and cameras. They contribute. They will take up the consumption to 40 gigabyte per hour, but then you have V2X come in, and then you have the very, very low latency requirements come in. So you're basically setting out very clearly the fact that 5G is needed, both for capacity, low latency, and maybe with so many sensors also for the massive machine type communication, the third vertical. Satish, would you want to add something? Satish is
Yes.
not. Yeah, thank you, Satish.
Yeah, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So hi, hello to everyone. One of the key things when we talk about reliability or anything to do with connected vehicles, two things to understand. One is the fine line between autonomous vehicles, or the degree of autonomy that most of the cars, the driverless cars, or whatever nature of the automated cars that are coming in, automated transport which is coming in, has. So there's a lot of autonomy built into the vehicles, and there is a certain amount of connectivity which is needed. When we look at the connectivity requirements of the vehicles, it's primarily drawn from at least to 3GPP. The inputs have been from an organization which is known as 5GAA, 5G Automotive Association. This is a lobby group of the vehicle companies. So when you look at the inputs which is coming from them, mostly it is minuscule control, something like, say, for example, left turn assist. And this is not true for everyone. It's only for a certain set of people. Intersection movement assist. Some of these things, one can argue, can also be done by applications like, say, for example, your Google Maps today. But then again, irrespective of whether it is done by apps or whatever assisted by the network, these are all small elements. The biggest connectivity issue comes in when you talk about recently in India, we had this some of the state governments, because of the children's safety and women's safety, mandated that you have live cameras inside of public transport vehicles. Now that's not your DVR. You don't necessarily have cameras inside of your vehicles with DVRs, which is recording locally, but then it has to be transmitted live, and that was a dictation from the government. So in these kind of scenarios is where you have a real strong connectivity requirement. The rest of the stuff is okay. I mean, as one of the other previous speakers was talking about, most of it can also be done in 4G. I mean, we're still not talking about 5G. 4G can address most of the requirements from a V2X perspective. But when it comes to these kind of issues of live transmission of high capacity cameras, it's only then that you are talking about a few tens of megabits in the uplink. Especially in the uplink, you have to realize that uplink is always the loose link on the in a communication network. Downlink, typically, because it's all downlink heavy. And this is where 5G comes into the picture, and this is where we really have to talk about safety. We really have to talk about assurances, and that's where 5G comes into the picture. And there are other aspects as well, but this is something that has to be really understood well in order to talk about any.
Let me bring Mr. Kadian, because he has a very long experience looking at networks. He has a very good understanding of the challenges that exist in quality of service, call drops, coverage issues, and has a very, very insightful mind about the fact that these are all actually business model driven issues. They are issues of investment, and they are issues of economics. So, Mr. Kadian, would you please give us your view of, you heard the industry requirements, you heard Jacques put in front of us a reminder of what all 5G brings. Sir, in a few minutes, if you can tell us what, in your view, are we headed towards when it comes to 5G?
Thank you, Sharad. And hello to everyone. As far as reliability is concerned, means the enhanced capabilities of 5G are going to help. And if we look at all kinds of applications which Jacques presented, 5G is essential. Means a few things can be done with 4G, but to meet all the requirements for all kinds of applications which we are looking for, 5G is essential. But in my opinion, one is the capability of the technology, what technology offers or what are the promises of the technology. Second is that what will be available in the real network.
Absolutely.
Whether we are use those technology capabilities when real networks appears. And people make mistakes or do not consider many aspects when they design their transport topology or various kinds of configurations on the ground. And that kind of performance is not available in the real networks. And second point is that it is very costly affair to provide that kind of reliability. Means even if you have technology capabilities, and that reliability is required in every nook and corner. And what is the most important point, what Jacques presented and commented, is that earlier we were working on the basis of averages. And now we need that kind of reliability at every moment and every point of the geography. And to meet that requirement, a huge investment may be required. Means you can build that if technologies are there and networks can be built, and then those can be made available. But the question is that whether there is a return of investment. So if there is a business value in this whole proposition, and then networks will come. Definitely it will come if there are no regulatory barriers or laws are barrier to implement that. A business will drive it. Issue is that whether there is a reward for every stakeholder. So if brand is owned by one service provider and he makes money and the biggest chunk of that money, and the responsibility lies with others, then it will not going to happen. So telcos, if telcos lose the brand or telcos are just liable to provide the reliable connectivity, and they are not getting return on that investment. So what is happening at the moment? Telcos are getting return on the basis of the volume of the consumptions. Volume. And in many cases, return is not based on the volume. If you want to build the reliability, you are not going to that proportion of the volume as a return. So how to build that? So if OEMs, car OEMs or the vehicle OEMs are creating a brand around that, they should be ready to invest to build that infrastructure and to own the responsibility of the reliability. So they are offering the services to the customer. They are tying up, or they are partnering with other things. Then they should be owning this problem. So it cannot happen that when it comes about the reliability, we pass on the buck to the telcos.
Absolutely.
So if we are, then we have to partner. We have to partner in terms of the investment in building that network. Now, last point is that whether every network has to be built with that reliability, or different service providers can come together and give a better reliability for this cause. So it is a competitive environment, or it is a collaborative environment which is going to work. So if we want to have a good reliability network across a national highway, so whether all telecom service provider of the country will build independently that reliable network, or they will collaborate, or they will provide the redundancy across the telcos. So individual telco has one reliability, but if you combine the reliability of different telcos, it may be a more reliable network. So we have to behave society manner, means how society behaves. That if you need a help from me, I am there. If I am available there, I will provide you help. So at that moment, I am not competing with you. So that is my thought. I think.
Thank you, Mr. Kadian. It's an excellent article. Always a pleasure to listen to you. And I know that Rebecca is about to ring a bell somewhere. But Ajay, what just got said is that you want a reliable network to run your brand. Then please pay up the money and work in hand with the telcos to take the investment. And actually, I would have continued on to say that there is this very interesting next question, which was about which way will this 5G investment draw in the beneficiary industry to the job of actually putting up the plumbing of these networks. But I'm going to have to pass it up. As I said, this panel should have been like an hour or more. But I'm just going to have to come towards the end. I will skip that question. It would have been a very interesting question about where these investments are going to come from. But still, I will ask that one last question, and please try to make it very brief, maybe like a half a minute. Where do we see the collaboration between telcos and the automotive vertical? I think I have seen this happen over the last 4 years, and I think Mr. Sethi has himself played a very significant role in how the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, how the automotive industry, and how the telcos kind of work together, at least for the reliability, for public safety part, in half minutes each. Where do you see? Have you any one of you have any thoughts about the collaboration between automotive and the communication industry for the 5G networks?
Yeah, so Sharad, mainly looking at the industry per se, they would the person who's creating network would need to get paid. So there would with standards or whatever interministerial work we are doing, new business models will emerge.
Yes.
There is a lot of opportunity to monetize whatever is going on. So telcos or OEMs or maybe service providers coming together and creating a value, and delivering finally charging. So finally, the customer is going to pay for it. So just
Absolutely.
having models to monetize it is what would make everyone happy. So
new business models are bound to emerge. There is value to be delivered. That value needs investments, and hence new business models will emerge, and leading to requirements of new standards, new interfaces. Yes, Mr. Bhushan, you have something to say.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Mr. Asif. Good to hear somebody talking about telcos and supporting telcos. So thank you very much. I think quickly, 5G is going to be a collaborative play, unlike 2G, 3G, 4G. Unless the ecosystem partners come together, the automotive companies come together and work along with telco, along with the application service provider. I read a very interesting article which said that the application play is going to be 3 times larger than the car industry itself. The application play which will come out of 5G automotive. you know. So I think there has to be a unique model, maybe a revenue sharing model in future, which has to emerge, where the telco, the application provider, and the automotive company come together and give experience to the customer and share the revenue together. Maybe that could be the model of the future, maybe few years down the line.
Yeah, with Mr. Musk presently seems to be running away with all alone. Ajay, you have a view?
Yeah, sure. I'll just add up to what Mr. Asif was saying is that the current state of affairs in the country is that the customer is not ready to pay. Let's accept that. They're not ready to pay. Still, there is a demand that they need a quality of service. So there is a balance to be done. So now that means there is a need for us to improve the quality of service and then go into a phase where if somebody is saying I'm ready to get a quality of, I demand a quality of service of 6 nines, okay, I'm ready to pay. I think more and more, I'll say business domains have started that. Even in our Indian railways and airlines, they are doing that graded kind of a charging on the seats. So maybe something of that sort we have to bring in from the telco perspective, and then we work on that mode. That's one part of it. And second part of it is there is a need for a big collaboration. One of the players that we are missing in this whole game is the telematics provider, the device provider himself. So he holds the key. So the journey starts from that point and the equipment getting merged. Clear?
Yes, yes.
All service path elements needs to come together to bring that kind of a experience, or maybe a graded experience, a 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines, depending upon that. And I like the concept which Jack presented, the slicing part. So maybe it's a slicing on the service types. So we bring that concept and accordingly see what value a customer is ready to pay. See,
sure.
We can't force the service onto a customer. We have to deliver a service which customer wants.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I made, that customer, you're saying the right thing. Customer will have to pay, and customer will pay when you deliver what the customer wants.
Yes.
Satish, would you have half a minute to add something? I can actually see Rebecca about to shut the floor on.
Yeah, one of the quick things, not so much as an operator, but I've never been able to understand what this reliability business is, because when I'm using Google Maps today and I'm driving in the streets of India, I don't have any issues. So what reliability are we talking about? When we talk about V2x, the amount of data is minuscule. And this kind of data any LTE network today can handle. That's not an issue. What we are talking about certain critical services. So when we talk about reliability, you really have to talk about the nature of service. You cannot just say it does not mean any connected car use case. Specific use cases will require reliability. For example, when you're talking about uplink, 10 video cameras, live streaming in a LTE cell is not possible. 5G, yes. There you're talking about reliability. And that is something that networks do have provision. 5G specifications do have provision to handle, and network providers can definitely handle if the use case throws up. We're just waiting for the spectrum to come up. The other issues, for example, coverage and other issues, those are again something which the operators can handle. It's not like it cannot be handled. For example, you're sitting inside of a metal shell, so signal strength inside of a car or any connected vehicle is an issue, but you do have antenna strips outside, so there are other ways of handling it. So, or more number of cells, or lower frequency bands in which you deploy the services. So
okay. There's a view from Satish. What are we talking about? There's not much of a problem. Okay, let's go back to Rebecca. Rebecca, there must be some audience questions.
Yes, there is. So we have one, it's kind of concurrent. There's 3 comments from one individual here. It starts with, for RTT around 10 Ms for provisioning the access network, what would be the service performance guarantees that can be targeted?
What are the service performance guarantees that can be
targeted? And then it says, conversely, for acceptable reliability and an affordable cost to the operator, what should be RTT? This is for piloting ITS use case on test bed. I don't.
So what I suggest, I think the question is about RTP and not RTSP, and some questions about what can be the committed response. My suggestion to the audience question is that I will take the responsibility of picking it up. It's a technical question. I will get answered and return it back to you. Can we move on to the next? Maybe one more?
All right. Well, we are exactly at the end of this session and ready to take a 15-minute break before we start our next session, which will be interoperability for mobile public safety network. And Sharad, I'll let you close with a few closing remarks for this panel, and I thank you all.
Thank you, Rebecca. And what I can basically say after this extremely live discussion and then hand over to Jacques to stitch it up is that some points were made here which are so important, which are, for instance, we need to know what the customer wants, and we need to know what is a marketable proposition, what can be sold, what will a customer pay for happily. And without that, asking for the 6 nines or service everywhere may never work. The other very important thing that we saw here was willingness to collaborate, the understanding and the urgency behind industry and the communication service providers getting together as a whole to get one sort of service put in front of the country, or one level of capability released to the country. And lastly, the gaps in standards that Mr. Mittal talked about, and picking them up, working with the industry, working with the SDOs to bring forward some use cases, and maybe the concluding remarks with the DG may bring some further insights about this. Jacques, over to you.
Thank you, Sharad. I think some very good points were made during this panel. I wish it would have lasted longer. This was very good. I think there's still a lot of questions around the service performance, reliability, and the implementation of 5G. It's still a work in progress. Luckily, we still have a little bit of time in front of us. This thing is being deployed in phases, and before we get all the pieces that we need, it's going to take a while. So I think during that time, we can spend that time to define how we're going to do it, how it's going to work. And a key item in there that was also mentioned in this panel is really, at the end, we need to figure out the business case. You know, as it was mentioned, it's great to invest in the network, but there's got to be a return for the telco. And as additional differentiation can be done in the network, it has implication also on business cases as well. Okay, and then who's willing to pay for this extra reliability and this extra coverage and this all of those things at the end is going to be also an important part of the discussion. But I think it was a very good start of a discussion to frame all the opportunities, but also all the work that still needs to be done.
Thank you, Jacques, and thank you, panelists. I said at the start, it was a very illustrious panel, and I wish I had 1 hour or more. Thank you, all of you. I will not be able to go one by one, but thanks very much for being on this panel. Good night and good morning.
Thank you very much, Sharad and Jacques and the panelists for this very exciting and just scratching the surface discussions on the topic of service performance reliability in connected cars context. We will now take a short break of, I think, 11 minutes and come back at 1950 IST to have the session on interoperability for mobile public safety networks. So while we are taking a break, audience, you may like to go through the handouts, which have some very interesting material, both from TSGSI and TIA on the work that we are doing as of now. And should you want to engage with us, reach out to us, please our contact details are mentioned in our brochures, respective brochures in the handouts. So see you at 1950. Thank you very much.
And also, if there are any questions, send them in and we will get them answered.
Yes, that too. Thank you.